Welcome, everyone. This is the Historic Preservation Commission meeting for April 14th. We could begin with the roll call.
Michelle Walker,
Present.
Roxy Deer,
Present.
Tina Conti,
Present.
Megan Ripperger,
Present.
Damon Jacobson.
Present.
Did everyone have a chance to go over the minutes from the last meeting?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved. I'll second.
Everyone in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Sounds like the minutes are approved. New business, follow up on information regarding 2110 and 2116 East Main Street. Dustin and I met with Ray Onco and Mark, help me with his name. DeLossie from Indiana Landmarks, and we discussed a variety of options. I don't know that any of those options are ready for prime time to be shared.
Yeah, unfortunately, the mayor and Beth were both under the weather for our meeting last week. So I think we came away from that with the intention of scheduling another meeting with all the same people to maybe come up with a maybe more concrete plan moving forward with the two houses. Does that seem?
Yeah. Just for reference, that is the Crane Sanitarium building in the adjacent house. The good news is that Indiana Landmarks is very interested in continuing to have talks with us to see what kind of progress might be made toward moving forward on those properties. So we don't have a lot to report at this time, but it sounded positive in the sense that there could be some options on the table that hadn't been explored in the past. So I look forward to a future meeting where we can get everyone to the table and discuss those options in more detail. But there is still interest in moving forward with a decision on those properties. So, and then the next, and was there any more follow-up on that anyone wanted to add? Okay. The next item on the agenda, Main Street Conservation District.
This is kind of just rooted in conversations I've had separately with a couple members of the commission. Just the idea of potentially placing Main Street, or it could include the block south and north of Main Street as well, into a conservation district, particularly with some of the development that is anticipated to be taking place down there over the next 5 years or so. And so for those of you who are a little bit newer to the commission, one of the chief responsibilities of the Historic Preservation Commission is to oversee the city's conservation and historic districts. And how that plays out typically is that if you're in a conservation district, anyone who wants to demolish, move, or build a new structure within the conservation district has to apply for a certificate of appropriateness that is then reviewed by the Historic Preservation Commission and voted on during a public hearing. So the process to create a conservation district is currently kind of tricky. The commission would have to settle on boundary lines. There are a few steps, but I think the biggest hurdle is then you have to have at least 50% of the property owners within that district have to provide written approval of becoming a district. And then if you are able to obtain that, then it needs approval by Common Council as well. I know when Brittany Miller was still with Indiana Landmarks, she was kind of pushing for us to potentially amend our historic preservation ordinance to make the threshold for creating a district a little bit lower. And so that's something that the commission could explore as well. And then as the ordinance is currently written, after you have a historic conservation district for 3 years, you could upgrade that to just a straight historic district. And then that would give the commission a little bit more power as far as now you're not just assessing demolitions and new builds, but any sort of like drastic changes to the exterior, for instance. And so that would be a potential option down the road if we were to create a conservation district first. Another thing, though, if you are to create a conservation district, the commission could create design guidelines for the district. So Our commission, and I can pass these out. Richmond's commission actually adopted design guidelines for the depot back in 2006, which are, I don't know if anyone currently on the commission has.
I'm taking two, is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. But these technically are still active and are something that we can share with property owners in the district. It's also, a resource for the commission to use. But that is something that you could conceivably then create for the downtown area to kind of help guide the aesthetics and appearance of any new development that would take place there over the coming years.
I
So,
remember reviewing these when we were looking at some of the properties in the Depot District, like when the Abilities
yes.
business was making their proposal. And so these are the same guidelines that we looked at before.
That's right, yeah. And so if they were to come back with new plans for the building there, this could be something that guides your assessment of the architectural renderings.
This is a great packet of information, and I suggest that we work on creating one of these. Maybe even if it doesn't include design guidelines for other conservation districts. I like the idea of the Main Street design guidelines, but just the general information to have on record for the other conservation district. But upon first thing that caught my attention was on page 5, it still has the old fine schedule in there. So if these are published anywhere, if there's a link anywhere online, we probably need to get those updated because those would reflect the HPC that were approved by the council, correct?
Yes,
It would be across all conservation districts. Okay.
exactly, yeah, that's a good point.
It's at the bottom of page 5,
Yes, thank you.
Certificate of Appropriateness, Article E.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And then, yeah, I agree, we should make these available on the HPC website. So if we could talk to Lindsay about getting this put on there as a link.
Yeah.
And then I know one of the things we were discussing, because the Star District has come up before, as far as turning that into a conservation district, we were talking about the possibility of going around needing 50% of the homeowners or property owners to buy in, and rather turn it into, we just declare it, and anybody who transfers sale of a building would then automatically be included. Could this be done in that if we were having trouble meeting our threshold?
So could what be done? Sorry.
Like this,
Turning it into a conservation that's then opt-in upon sale, rather than needing to get 50% of the property owners to sign off?
I think it's to even just create it from the beginning, you have to have 50%.
Okay.
unless we
then-
make amendments to,
Right.
okay.
And then I think on top of that, I'd have to double check the ordinance. I think people can also opt out. So even if your neighborhood becomes a conservation district, if you've selected to opt out, I think for maybe a certain period of time, maybe it's 10 years, it just wouldn't apply to you. So I think that was something that Brittany was really pushing for, was to give the districts a little bit more teeth, I think.
I think Indiana Landmarks, if I remember in that packet too, they had a thing that you could get a tax break if you basically put a rider on it to opt into the district, right? Which we could use as an incentive to get people to want to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I when I'm thinking about Main Street, it's a completely different conversation than the one you're having with Star, because there is so much work happening in downtown right now that when we start to think about Revitalize Richmond dollars and all the other dollars coming in there and the current needs of our business owners down there, I would want them to be involved in this process as much as possible. We need to incorporate Main Street Richmond, the new Flaherty and Collins, because you don't want to make decisions for people who already feel like everyone's already making a lot of decisions for them. So this is a great opportunity for us to be a community partner and show that we're doing the right thing to save these buildings, but also giving them the chance to weigh in on design elements and standards that we're setting for the investment that they've made over many of those building owners, not business owners, building owners have been there for a very long time. And so getting their support would be a major win for that community.
Absolutely.
Is that what the Depot District did? Did they come together with those Depot District business owners to form their Depot District whatever? Did they did they weigh in on these guidelines? Because there's still that group of, I don't.
They have a
They're not
depot
a
business group, a
group,
DBG, but I don't know if they weighed in on this.
Okay.
But I mean, I think, and how are these enforced? Are they?
So it would be if work if someone applies for a certificate of appropriateness, this would be kind of what guides you.
So was this given to our friends that came before us to have those houses, buildings demolished right at the corner?
I believe it was, yeah.
I think they were aware, yeah.
Because I know he gave us,
The architect.
yes,
was
the renderings
familiar.
of what they were looking at, and they were keeping it in line, so I didn't know.
Yeah, I think he had made some effort to capture some
Okay.
Italianate characteristics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
My question, Dustin, is in these talks about potentially putting the Main Street under some kind of conservation district, what would be different about that from the rules that are already in place? Like, I assume that if you tear down a building downtown, you have to get permits. If you want to make major changes to a facade, there has to be permits, is that correct?
Yeah, just in this case, you couldn't obtain those permits until the HBC is first signed off.
Okay.
And so, I mean, just maybe an obvious example would be the Flaherty and Collins 6th and Main, the new build. One step that they would have taken would have been to share the renderings with all of you and to get a COA from the Historic Preservation Commission.
It's another box that they have to check before any major
Right.
building is
So,
touched.
as it stands now, that new development at the corner of Sixth and Main, they didn't have to get any style guidelines approved, it was more like structural and safety.
We, on the zoning end, we have some architectural standards, but they're not very detailed. So I think that, and I mean, I don't know if you've all seen the renderings. I think they've done a nice job. But conceivably, they could have had something approved that, architecturally does not necessarily mesh with the rest of the historic downtown architecture.
So to Roxy's point, I think it would be good to talk to the building owners, the businesses, to see if they want that consistency, which, in my opinion, is important. When you look at other great downtowns, they retain that historical flavor. Even when they put up a new building, it still dovetails in with the existing architecture.
Definitely.
So
Oh,
I would think they would want to buy into that, but I think we should get their.
Well, yeah, I mean, it sounds like next steps is try to get a list of property owners in the area and businesses and see if we can't get
that something
some sort of meeting together or bring them together.
That you could provide, that Dustin or Monica could provide for us a list of all those property owners?
Yes, and then what would the boundaries be that you would be looking
Yeah,
for?
so they're looking for us to, or it was suggested we create those boundaries for Main Street.
Yeah.
One block over.
I just with all the work that's going on consistently with where all the funding is at, can we align with that from Star Jeanette building to the theater is but we could extend it down further,
Oh, from 1st to 10th.
essentially.
Okay.
I think that's the radius.
First
Because I know Main Street, Main
A
Street
and A.
Richmond was 5th to 10th.
Yeah.
So this is expanding.
Well, and Main Street's even expanded their district.
okay.
And you want to look into what UEA, like you want to make sure that you're not cutting someone else's district in half. So UEA, you start to think about, well, this side would then be funded by UEA dollars and this side couldn't be. Well, UEA gives funding for building, exterior building renovation. And so you don't want to cut somebody out because they're not in the right district anymore. So
Gotcha.
making sure it's a cohesive plan that the entire community agrees upon.
Like the map that we got from the county that we had at the meeting with Brittany. Someone at the county printed us off a large map showing downtown Richmond from Main Street, maybe B Street to Main Street, and then all the way to the Depot District, and had the boundaries outlined in different colors showing this is what was Main Street Richmond, this is the Depot District, this is the Star District, and how some of the things overlapped. The national Star District, not,
The local star, yeah.
not our local,
Yeah.
to clarify. And it was very informative. So to get a map like that shows UEA boundaries, Main Street Richmond boundaries, so we don't omit,
And
helpful.
I think this conversation started from that Main Street, who's doing what conversation. So Main Street organization is going through a strategic plan where they pulled all of the players, all the different organizations with all the different hats on and said, what do you do? And they put it kind of into this matrix of this person's responsible for this, 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 this. And then we all broke out into groups and we're talking about, okay, but where are the gaps? What else is missing? Who's not at the table? And I think that there's partnering with Main Street while they're in this strategic mindset of here's how we're redefining where our neighborhood is. They're getting everybody to the table. This just needs to be a collaborative effort and not us doing this without them. Like, we all need to push it together.
Yeah.
So, and it's coming up for R&R. We're picking out paint colors for buildings, and we're having the conversation, does this color look right in this neighborhood on this block? But then we hear from our painter, well, this building down the street is being painted this color. And so as the investments are coming in, we need to hop on this quickly because there's so much happening downtown. And the last thing we want is a building that doesn't match or doesn't fit in or becomes the eyesore that, because we didn't have standards in place.
So it sounds like what a good approach would be, to come up with a proposed area that it would be, come up with the people involved in that area. And I think come up with a document like this, that's a proposal of what it would look like and how everybody benefits from it, so that we have something to discuss in an open meeting here.
I agree.
Does this come first or does the conservation district come first?
I think you need to establish a conservation district first.
The only reason I was saying this is just to get people to buy in, if they know what the target is, where we're going with it. It doesn't have to be adopted yet, but something is like, if it was, here's how we imagine that we would control colors and what gets built. And this is
Facade
kind
elements.
of what you're signing into, or at least our target goal. That way people aren't like, just feeling like, oh, you're just taking things away. It's like, no, this is what we're proposing to help.
Yeah.
And I think that would help get buy-in.
I have a question. And I know the city of Richmond, but does anyone know if Centerville or Cambridge City, if they have guidelines like this? Because you drive down their main street and they're that picturesque, especially Cambridge City because it's so wide. And you look at the buildings and the way that they've been maintained. Do we know if they have,
I don't know offhand.
I think
is there a
Cambridge
reference we could
may.
use? Pendleton
Brenda
has one, I know.
McLean would be the one to ask that question to,
Well,
or Jim King.
I wonder, and this is jumping the gun a little bit, because as we said, we need to figure out what we would propose to be the boundaries before we start establishing
Right.
design guidelines. But in the future, when we establish some design guidelines, I think it would be really helpful to do some kind of survey of the existing architecture that's there. Is there anyone at the city that already does architectural surveys and has that experience?
It could be a great role for Ball State's
That's what
architectural
I was
Yeah.
thinking.
program.
Yeah.
That's, I think, a pretty easy ask for us to make.
Yeah. So that could be in the future. As far as establishing a boundary, like, I think that things look very different if you go a block north or south. Like A Street, north or south, it looks different than Main Street. Do we want to just focus on Main Street?
Let others answer.
Yeah, I'm like.
I mean, if you look at the old Verizon building on the corner of, was that 10th? and
Oh, is that the
North
Frontier
A?
building now?
Yeah.
Renee,
I think it depends where we're talking about. I don't think we necessarily just want to say A Street, or it doesn't have to stay rectangular.
We could-
And I'd
yeah.
encourage us not to stay rectangular, but kind of draw boundaries around things that have maintained enough to be cohesive.
Yeah.
And things that are kind of falling outside of that, we can keep it out of the box.
Yeah.
Are we able to get a digital copy of, I guess we could just do it on GIS. You can pull it up on GIS and click the boxes to tell you what the boundaries are. Just, I don't know, seeing a big one for our next meeting would be nice to have, to look at what those boundaries are and if they can be outlined with the UEA and the rising, or,
get all the overlapping maps.
Yeah.
So that everyone, I just don't want to cut any business building owners' funding options.
Right.
And put and put harder guidelines on them.
Exactly.
because then we would know where we don't want to exclude. and also, you know, draw around a building like the Verizon building or the Palida, you know, or,
Or
you
the
know,
library.
or the
Yeah.
Or we could draw a bigger box and just have exclusion zones, like,
That
this
is
is the
true.
box, these are special exceptions because of existing buildings.
But
et cetera,
moving
et
forward,
cetera.
if they were to demolish and rebuild, then they would have to refer to guidelines. Is that what
Exactly,
I'm
because
understanding?
like, if somebody hopefully does something with a cheese grater in the future, then it would not look completely out of place anymore.
There are plans for that building.
I mean, this is just my opinion, but I personally think that if we simplified things and just started with Main Street itself and not extend to like North A, South A, but that's just my opinion at this moment. Now, if people have other ideas.
I just
I'm
wonder
open to
how
that.
much extra work it'd be if we decided we wanted to add this block or that block along the way, like going through this whole process all over again versus kind of being ahead of it a little bit.
I was just pulling up the map to see what, you know, one block north and one block south of Main Street.
I like including North A up to North A down to South A because you have quite a few historic buildings in those realms.
North
So you
side's
have
definitely.
Music City Place, you have some churches that fall in that space, you have the Leland, all feel like they're part of downtown Richmond. They don't, I don't think they believe they're part of the depot, but
Right.
maybe it's including them too. It's, you're part of this, we want you, I don't
And
know.
including a North A is what I'm picturing is the Paliden building. So when I'm gonna say when, not if, that gets renovated or demolished or whatever, then we would have guidelines in place for them to bring back something that would be more fitting, especially across from a 1865
Oh,
Quaker
that's
meeting
true.
/ museum.
Well, and I agree with Damon that, you know, if we do extend the boundaries further out, then having exclusions apply.
Yeah.
Like the library obviously isn't going to look like
Right.
1880s building. so-
Right.
Right, and there's, yeah, I mean, that's, you want almost a mixed use of space, you don't want all historic, you don't want, there's a little bit of need for everything down there.
Because I'm looking at, like, there's no residential, right? From 1st to 10th, from A to A, north and south to A is what I'm looking. I'm like, you know, North A, Jack Elster Plaza, the
Other than-
library.
Some apartments, I guess, above the.
Yeah, you'll have apartments in the storefronts,
Yeah,
but,
Storefront, yeah, but those are already incorporated with, not, I guess, single-family residence or, you know, duplexes or something. Like if you go on up South A, like when I'm going home, I take South A and turn on 18th Street, you go by residences there. It wouldn't include those, sorry. Just familiarizing myself to look, while I look at the map. Yeah.
Well, Roxy, you suggested that we try to meet with them sooner while they're in this process. Are their meetings open, or how would we get on their calendar? or-
you mean Main Street?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no full-time staff right now at Main Street, so I think it would be talking to their board, which Dustin seems pretty connected to that organization, so maybe it's a sit-down with their exec team and representatives from us to talk about conservation. I think Dakota's on their exec board, but he's controlling all the money downtown, so we should probably include him in this conversation. And then, I think that would be enough. They have a business owner represent, you always want to include a business owner in these conversations, so they feel,
There used to be like a downtown business group. And they would meet, do they still meet? They would meet in the Rivers building?
Three
Fort was
Rivers
Rivers?
yeah.
Three Rivers?
West End.
Yeah.
No, right now that group's, as far as I know, that group is not meeting officially, but,
So, I mean, that's a start, I mean,
yeah.
he has contact, I mean, Dustin has contact with the board, but I'm thinking like business owners who is there. And that was pre-COVID, so lots changed.
I think that's a really exciting conversation. I think it's a welcome conversation for the work being done on Main Street. It is,
Definitely.
I know as we're putting money in, we're going, who's gonna protect this building after us? And who's going to make sure that the windows don't fall out again? And that all this work doesn't just go to waste, so. These
I
are,
admired those windows on my way in this evening.
yeah, thank you, they're beautiful.
And then do we want to talk any more about, I know we've brought it up a few times about the Star District, and, you know, I know Landmarks had kind of suggested that we look into some kind of conservation there, but I'm not really sure what needs to happen, because apparently we have to get 50% buy-in, and there's a lot of
Unless we
landlords.
amend it.
Unless we amend it, yeah.
Yeah, part of Brittany's recommendations was kind of a two-step process. First, changing the ordinance to eliminate the 50% buy-in, but I think she also wanted to create a way to expedite the process from getting from a conservation district to a historic district, because once you're in that historic district, you're looking at more things. You're looking at facades and windows and things of that nature, whereas you're limited when you're a conservation district. So yeah, I think Brittany wanted the commission to consider making those changes and then to turn Star into a historic district.
And there's a 3-year gap between those two, right?
As of
Currently
right
there
now.
is,
Yeah.
yeah. And after that 3 years, you once again have to get 50% buy-in. So and that,
Every 3 years.
Yeah.
The way it's written right now, it'd be every 3 years, we would have to reassess the district.
after the first 3 years, if you want to turn it into a historic
Oh, okay.
district,
Okay.
yeah. And so for that reason, we have 4 districts right now. All 4 of them are conservation districts. They've never become historic districts.
Could we bring potential new ordinance to this commission next month to look at?
Work on it via
Work on it
email.
via email the next, and then I think we've already written most of it, right?
Brittany had a really helpful
Yeah.
model ordinance that I can send out to everyone as well.
If we could look at that and then next month review that and.
And I mean, I'm not sure if we can definitely do that, but I think Roxy was making a good point earlier. If we're focusing more on Main Street now, the 50% buy-in might not be the worst thing. I mean, these two things can happen concurrently, but unlike the Star District, I don't know that the ordinance change necessarily has to come first. But nevertheless, it makes sense.
Yeah, 'cause I know some of the building owners are very, very difficult to get a hold of, as I understand
Yeah.
it. So we may have to figure out some way around that, but
We also, at no other point in time, have had this much local ownership in
Right,
downtown,
that's awesome.
and I think we're getting ready to have some
Oh,
more.
in downtown?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so I think if we're going to do it, this is probably the time. There's also more investment coming, so we want to get ahead of those investments and what could potentially happen, so.
Would anything that we would put in our design guidelines overlap any of the normal city ordinances that have to do with signage? Like, would we be making recommendations on signages, or is that more like a city thing?
I think that would just depend on how you write the ordinance. So I think you could have a historic district which allows the commission to also oversee new signage. There are zoning requirements for signage which are somewhat strict, but if you all looked at those and thought that you would like downtown to be even more strict, that's something you could write into the ordinance.
Well, I was thinking in terms of, many, many years ago, I worked for Main Street Incorporated. And one of the things I learned from the business owners is that signage is really tricky because they rely on it. And with so many restrictions in place about signage, I think there's a restriction that the signage can't come out perpendicular to the building.
This
It
is
has to be flat against the building, right?
this is interesting. I just recently found out, because I'm on the City's Urban Enterprise Association, and we have this signage program that we're going towards. And signs can project out from the buildings. The only catch is that they have to get permission from the city's Board of Works because they're projecting over public right-of-way.
Yeah.
But, I mean, as long as it's not a safety hazard and it's high enough, signs can project outward. But I recently learned that it seems like most of
Good.
the business owners
See, I
downtown.
remember
They
many-
think
That's
that
been
they
the
could.
rumor.
Yeah, that's been
Yeah.
the rumor, and no way to.
Well, I remember many, many years ago, many businesses were very frustrated that the Board of Works would not give them permission.
Hmm.
for
Oh, so that
perpendicular
might have
signage.
been, so they have to get permission and maybe they just weren't getting the permission, so then it started
Yeah.
going around that you can't have these
Yeah.
because they weren't approved.
But like last year, I went to historic Frankenmuth in Michigan, and they had many shops that did have, historically appropriate signage that came out perpendicular, and it was very eye-catching and attractive, and it added to the character of the
Yeah.
downtown.
Yeah.
So I think that's something to explore if we could find a way to help the business owners and present guidelines that are beneficial to them and attractive.
Yeah. And I was just going to say, the UEA is about to unveil a sort of a new program to assist business owners that are downtown and in the depot, specifically with kind of projecting signs that are, create a little bit more uniformity and kind of that historic
All
look.
they have to do is anybody complains, tell them to take a look at Freeport, Maine, and realize that we are not that strict.
Yeah.
Because they had to build a McDonald's to the code of their district, their guidelines, to where it wasn't your traditional golden arches.
No, yeah, and you see that in bigger
Yeah, historic areas.
touristy,
and-
yeah.
yep.
Charleston, Hilton
Holland,
Head.
Michigan, when you said Frankenmuth, I was like, I remember going through Holland, Michigan, it was like that.
Yeah.
It's like, we could make it really, but we don't want to. We want to encourage growth
Yeah, I
and
just see
new
us just
business.
preventing neon signs and modern thing, but like as long as it looks.
We don't want a
somewhat
sign like that
appropriate.
was at First Care or whatever it is now, that was at the corner of
Right.
Walgreens, 37th Street. I'm like, God. Yeah. It's like blinding. That, I like that, that you have confirmed that they can have projecting signs, because those are the vintage signs
Yeah.
Yeah.
that came out.
Board of Works just approved one 2 or 3 weeks ago for a
Okay.
new depot business. So.
Wonderful. Oh, I'm excited.
Any other new business to propose?
Reedmore is almost done, and we will have a series of community events. So keep an eye out for that, but I'd love for all of you to attend a community leadership
So
appointment there.
is it just white boxed and then you're looking for a developer to kind of come in and take it over from there?
So apartments are not white box, they are like livable.
Okay.
They will have
What they did
appliances
above the,
above secret ingredient. We'll stage them like they're real apartments. The downstairs is white boxed, probably some of the nicest white boxing you'll see as far as amenities. We're adding, it's not just a bathroom, it's a fancy bathroom.
Yeah.
So yes, white box, but we are working with a company through the Earlham grant to find the best fit for that space.
Wonderful.
So,
Yeah, great.
yeah,
Want to see more of that.
yeah, we're excited.
So our homework is to get a list, we're getting a list from Dustin of the Main Street to A business owners, property owners.
So that would be from 1st to 10th, and then from North A to South A.
Well, did we want to just limit it to sort of the executive committee for now to?
Well, if
For
he gets a
Main
list,
Street.
he's just getting a list of the property owners.
Because we would need 55%,
And
but I
then we
think the
could
first
review that And
conversation.
then decide if boundaries might need to change.
But I think
or-
before we go public with, any more public than we already are,
Right.
right? Is having a meeting with the Main Street group and just
Yeah.
making sure that this is going along with their
That would be the
strategic
second.
plan too.
Yeah.
And all of those, because they're working really hard to bring some new energy to that area, so.
Any other homework for us? You were gonna mail out the proposed conservation district that Brittany had sort of
Oh,
drafted
yeah. Yeah.
for the STAR, and we could just look at it,
Mm-hmm.
review that. We could probably use a
Yeah.
refresher on that.
Yeah. I'll see
Just out of pure laziness, do we have maps of all of the districts? We have like a map that shows them outlined?
GIS,
Okay.
and if you go to the county, I can get contact information for you, and we can get them printed out.
Yeah, it'd be nice to have
Yeah.
just an at-hand map.
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the things I was thinking, like especially as we're talking to Star and we've got this for the depot, is it'd be nice to identify by district, where we're at and where we would like to go with those districts to protect them. Because it sounds like we have the style guide for here, but maybe not every district. And we
Right.
should look at like, where are we not doing enough to protect it, more than just like sitting here and saying, we need to review what you're doing, but what else can we do? Like, again, just because my personal focus right now is Star. like talking, because I know the mayor's working on land banks to get people to own those. We know there is a ordinance out to try to help get some of the bad actors out of the neighborhood. But there are several angles we can take to get involved in to push that we actually make these districts better, not just policing them.
Right.
And I think by district, we should look at what we can do in each district to do better.
Yeah, because they vary drastically.
Right. And we should have a master list and come up with a plan of how to do it.
Yeah. I'll get you information.
Perfect, thank you.
You're welcome.
One other thing to note, maybe to consider before the next meeting is, as I mentioned last time, in July, a new state law will go into effect that for this commission basically means that the meetings will either remain in here and be televised on WCTV, or they would move presumably down into the Hutton Room. And so maybe just before the next meeting, decide what you would like to do after July. If you'd like to stay up here, WCTV is of course here this evening, or if you would rather begin meeting down in the Hutton Room. And maybe next month, you all could take a vote. And
Thank you for that reminder.
Anything else?
Did anybody else attend that reclamation meeting that the online meeting?
I was not able.
Okay, because it was really amazing. One thing that I took from it, they were talking about tearing buildings down, and instead, several cities, and much larger than Richmond, but they started passing ordinances where you couldn't just simply tear down these old buildings, that you had to reclaim them. It slowed people down from destruction, and it created a depot of items they could use for restoring other buildings that kept it appropriate. And I can share the Zoom meeting with everybody if you want, but it really just went into the details of how, and they went over like 6 different cities. They had representatives of how they did a reclamation ordinances. Each city had it slightly differently on how they did it. But the big thing is to kind of get people involved. Like, if you want to tear this down, it is a historic building. It is important. We can't just take a backhoe to it. We actually have to save it as we go. I know Kamei and I have.
Oh, I love that idea.
Bemoaned historically watching them take down these buildings, and they just take a backhoe to it. These timbers that are 200, 150 to 200 years old are just getting snapped in half. They're non-replaceable. It's a non-renewable resource. We should be taking more care when these buildings come down to try to salvage what we can from them.
I had looked into that with the city and asked, because there's a building that is slated to be torn down and it has wonderful pillars. So for personal reasons, I was trying to figure out how I could get those pillars because they match a building that I own. And they said that the city can't allow that to happen, but the contractor, so you can get in touch with the contractor or whoever is awarded the contract to demolish it and work with them.
Yeah, it just seems, and I have
There's gotta
I've
be
talked to
some way
Scott
to-
about it, and Scott has gotten in a disagreement with some of the people that do that, so he's not allowed to go in and salvage it. We really need written ordinance that, no, there is a
Yeah.
period that even if we don't force somebody to hire a reclamation crew to reclaim the whole building, that there is a reclamation period that between demolition and approval.
Whoever the
that's to
contract
actually-
has, that they
right,
have to
actually
allow
go
it.
in and save reasonable things. I mean, I'd like to see it completely deconstructed, but that does add cost, and I don't know if we can sustain that.
Yeah.
But at the very least, just having a period of reclamation where, it doesn't necessarily have to be the whole building, but important pieces
The
can be
pieces
saved
of it.
before you go in.
Well, one of the things that I heard that was, one of the reasons for the pushback was if the contractor is more or less in charge of the property, they can't just let anybody walk on and start salvaging stuff because
It's a
then they're
major
liable.
safety.
Right,
It's
absolutely.
a major safety issue.
So there would be a lot of things to work out in that regard, but I agree, it's really hard to reclaim, as Tina said, like, we see a beautiful building that still has some nice things in it, and how do we, one, make sure they don't go to the landfill or get destroyed, and then 2, where do those things get stored
Yeah.
if they are
Right.
preserved? There used to be what's the home restore place on the east side that they were.
By the motel in
Yeah.
Papa Joe's. It has a for sale sign in the window. I noticed that
Yeah,
this evening.
it hasn't been in business, but I know I've been to Cincinnati a couple of times, and there's a warehouse down there of reclaimed architectural salvage. I think there's a couple of places like that in Cincinnati that's wonderful.
R&R has done some reclamation for the county. It's just so, one, it's a time, right? Like for a volunteer organization to, it's hard to get volunteers to want to go do extremely hard work when the project's not being turned around into something beautiful, right? It's sad. So there could be some really cool conversations about, what happens to these homes, what is the process, who holds the supplies that are collected. But I would love to see some ordinances that historic elements of the home are protected somehow, some way, because we could all use them at any given minute, so.
I was trying to salvage brick from the last thing they tore down. I just never got out there in time before it got hauled away in a truck. And I was like, oh, what's with that brick?
Or chop, like they had brought it, that one on A Street, or no, Main Street and whatever, they had a chipper out there that like chipped it all into
Mulch.
like sand, gravel. Yeah, like a mulch, but it was brick and everything else. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just devastating. I mean, that stuff, they don't make it anymore. It's gone
Yeah.
now forever.
Yep.
It's devastating.
Roxy, do you find that Richmond Neighborhood Restoration, does the community widely understand that you are sort of a private volunteer organization, that you're not run by the city? You're not,
No.
like, are there things that we can do to help people understand that if they want to see positive change in our community, they can volunteer, they can join
Yes.
R&R, that it is a private volunteer organization?
Yeah, we are often confused with,
But it's a nonprofit.
at the city.
Private nonprofit.
Yeah, we're a private
private
nonprofit.
Yeah, that's
We're
the key.
confused as an entity of the city, Main Street organization, everything, anything and everything.
Private as a nonprofit, so then people
Yeah.
think you're turning, you're turning a profit, and you're
Yeah,
not.
no, and so yes, we would love any support and help. We right now our residential properties are kind of on pause just because of some contractor issues, but we finally have gas in the house, and then so we're at about a 2-month pause right now on residential. But once we can kick it into high gear, we will need every volunteer possible because we'd like to finish that house by fall. But that means a lot of hands on deck. So if we could get some support, and it's slowly growing. Obviously, our focus right now has been on the downtown district because that's where the 98% of my funding is coming from. So that's where the focus is. But once we're able to focus back on the Star neighborhood, I think the mission and vision and the communication to the public will be different than what it is right now.
Because we've had people come before the Historic Preservation Commission and they'll say like, why aren't you fixing up this building on my
Yep.
corner? And we have to explain to them that is not our role.
Yes.
And so we encourage them to join the neighborhood restoration to bolster the efforts of that.
I appreciate
group.
that.
Yeah. So there is confusion in the community, and we
there is.
will continue
Yeah.
to try to clarify things
Yeah.
for people.
No, and obviously we're a 1-person staff right now, but the more staff that we build on, we have to keep that communication at the center of everything so people know that what we're doing, how we're doing it, and how they can help be a part of it.
Yeah. Okay, very good. Well, do we have a motion to adjourn for tonight?
I'll make a motion.
Second it?
All in favor?
Aye, aye.
All right, so moved.
Thank you, thank you. That
Thanks,
was a great
everyone.
meeting.
Yeah.
Thank
You are watching Whitewater Government Television, WGTV, Channel 11, part of the Whitewater